Welcome to Neilist Narrates, The Color Out of Space, by H.P. Lovecraft, Part 2. It was then that I heard the story, and as the rambling voice scraped and whispered on, I shivered again and again, despite the summer day. Often I had to recall the speaker from ramblings, piece out scientific points which he knew only by a fading parrot memory of professors' talk, or bridge over gaps where his sense of logic and continuity broke down. When he was done, I did not wonder that his mind had snapped a trifle, or that the folk of Arkham would not speak much of the blasted heath. I hurried back before sunset to my hotel, unwilling to have the stars come out above me in the open, and the next day returned to Boston to give up on my position. I could not go into that dim chaos of old forest and slope again, or face another time that grey blasted heath, where the black well yawned deep beside the tumbled bricks and stones. The reservoir will soon be built now, and all those elder secrets will be safe forever under watery fathoms. But even then, I do not believe I would like to visit that country by night. At least, not when the sinister stars are out, and nothing could bribe me to drink the new city water of Arkham. It all began, old Emmy said, with the meteorite. Before that time, there had been no wild legends at all since the witch trials, and even then these western woods were not feared half so much as the small island in the Miskatonic where the devil held court besides the curious altar, older than the Indians. These were not haunted woods, and their fantastic dusk was never terrible till the strange days. Then there had come that white noontide cloud, that string of explosions in the air, and that pillar of smoke from the valley far in the wood. And by night all Arkham had heard of the great rock that fell out of the sky and bedded itself in the ground beneath the well at the Nahum Gardner place. That was the house which had stood there. The blasted heath was to come. The trim white Nahum Gardner house amidst its fertile gardens and orchards. Nahum had come to town to tell people about the stone, and had dropped in at Amney Pierce's on the way. Emmy was 40 then, and all the queer things were fixed very strongly in his mind. He and his wife had gone with the 3 professors from Miskatonic University, who hastened out the next morning to see the weird visitor from unknown stellar space, and had wondered why Nahum had called it so large the day before. It had shrunk, Nahum said as he pointed out the big brownish mound upon the ripped earth and charred grass near the archaic well sweep in his front yard. But the wise men answered that stones do not shrink. Its heat lingered persistently, and Nahum declared it had glowed faintly in the night. The professors tried it with a geologist's hammer, and found it was oddly soft. It was, in truth, so soft as to be almost plastic, and they gouged rather than chipped a specimen to take back to the college for testing. They took it in an old pail borrowed from Nahum's kitchen, for even the small piece refused to grow cool. On the trip back they stopped at Ammy's to rest, and seemed thoughtful when Miss Pierce remarked that the fragment was growing smaller and burning the bottom of the pail. Truly it was not large, but perhaps they had taken less than they thought. The day after that, all this was in June of '82. The professors had trooped out again in the great excitement. As they passed Ammy's, they told him what queer things the specimen had done, and how it had faded wholly away when they put it in a glass beaker. The beaker had gone too, and the wise men talked of the strange stone's affinity for silicon. It had acted quite unbelievably in that well-ordered laboratory, doing nothing at all and showing no occluded gases when heated on charcoal, being wholly negative in the borax bead, and soon proving itself absolutely non-volatile at any producible temperature, including that of an oxyhydrogen blowpipe. On an anvil it appeared highly malleable, and in the dark its luminosity was very marked. Stubbornly refusing to grow cool, it soon had the college in a state of real excitement, and when upon heating before the spectroscope, it displayed shining bands unlike any known colors of the normal spectrum, there was much breathless talk of new elements, bizarre optical properties, and other things which puzzled men of science are wont to say when faced by the unknown. Hot as it was, they tested it in a crucible with all the proper reagents. Water did nothing, hydrochloric acid was the same. Nitric acid and even aqua regia merely hissed and spattered against its torrid invulnerability. Emmy had difficulty in recalling all of these things, but recognized some solvents as I mentioned them in the usual order of use. There were ammonia and caustic soda, alcohol and ether, nauseous carbon disulfide, and a dozen others. But although the weight grew steadily less as time passed and the fragments seemed to be slightly cooling, there was no change in the solvents to show that they had attacked the substance at all. It was a metal, though, beyond a doubt. It was magnetic, for one thing, and after its immersion in the acid solvents there seemed to be faint traces of the Woodman-Stator figures found on meteoric iron. When the cooling had grown very considerable, the testing was carried on in glass, and it was in the glass beaker that they left all the chips made of the original fragment during the work. The next morning both chips in the beaker were gone without a trace, and only a charred spot marked the place on the wooden shelf where they had been. All this the professors told Emmy as they paused at his door, and once more he went with them to see the stony messenger from the stars. Though this time his wife did not accompany him, it had now most certainly shrunk, and even the sober professors could not doubt the truth of what they saw. All around the dwindling brown lump near the well was a vacant space, except where the earth had caved in, and whereas it had been a good 7 feet across the day before, it was now scarcely 5. It was still hot, and the sages studied its surface curiously as they detached another and larger piece with hammer and chisel. They gouged deeply this time, and as they pried away the smaller mass, they saw that the core of the thing was not quite homogeneous. And that is where I shall end part 2. Join me next time for part 3. Interesting story so far. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time.